Hello, my name's Eric Wishart. I'm responsible for special projects with AFP News Agency, and I'm also a former editor-in-chief. And my responsibilities include ethics and the style book, and under that comes sourcing. There's been a lot of discussion recently about anonymous sourcing, particularly following an article in The Atlantic that said that President Donald Trump had made disparaging remarks about the American military. And it was all based on anonymous sources. So as we know, Donald Trump is not a fan of anonymous sources. A lot of the most critical coverage about him comes from within his administration from unidentified sources. So I just thought it would be useful to take a few minutes today to explain why journalists use anonymous sources and why you can take your own decision whether or not you want to believe them. So I would say there are two main reasons why journalists would use an anonymous source over, obviously, the preferable identified source. The first is when an official who is not authorized to give certain information decides it's in the public interest to have it published by a journalist. So they'll contact the journalist, they'll say, I've got this information, the world should know about it, but legally, I cannot give it, or for other reasons, retribution, online harassment. So in that case, the journalist decides if it's worth reporting or not, and should, unless it's absolutely exceptional, have a second or third source to corroborate it. And if you use a single anonymous source, that really has to go to the top of the publication, and the source has to be impeccable. The other main reason is to protect a source from physical, legal, or other dangers. And these are photographs from the Hong Kong protesting by AFP photographers. And it was very difficult because a lot of the student protesters were reluctant to give their names for family reasons. They could have faced legal consequences. They could face consequences with their education establishments. So in these cases, you speak to them, you find out factual information, not opinion. You don't use anonymous sources for opinion. Factual information, and you give as much of an explanation of who the person is as possible. Master student at a university, for example, surname X, and they don't want to give their identity for X reasons. So, but in that circumstance, you should have preferably two, if not three sources. And you don't want them all working together, because one person can be trying to manipulate you by giving you one set of facts and saying, well, ask these two others, and they'll say the same thing. So you need independent sources to give your reporting credibility. So why should you, as a reader, a news consumer, trust anonymous sources or trust journalists and their anonymous sources? This is where reputable news organizations publish online their ethical guidelines, their style guidelines, their guidelines for using anonymous sources. So I wrote the sourcing guidelines for AFP News Agency. So if you see an AFP story quoting an anonymous source, you can go on our site, and please feel free to send me a message and I can send you the link. You can go on the site and read our rules on using anonymous sources. And on that basis, you can decide whether or not you want to believe it. But if you follow a particular media, you see they use anonymous sources and time shows that the information was correct, then I think you can put trust in that reporting. And of course, again, an important thing, and this is a kind of implication from Donald Trump, journalists know who the sources are. They're anonymous to the outside world, but the journalist knows who the source is. The source is not anonymous to the journalist, as Jeffrey Goldberg pointed out when he was defending his reporting on Donald Trump's comments about the military, which came in for a lot of criticism. So I hope that was a useful, brief explanation of why we use anonymous sources in journalism. And as I say, please feel to contact me if you have any questions. And thank you for listening.